Michael, we're on YouTube if you want to check it. Okay, we've got people filtering in. Yes, hello, hello. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome, Betsy. We're glad you're here and that all went well. I see a couple of new names and faces. Or I've seen them over the past couple of weeks, but never had a chance to say hello. So I want to say hi to Miriam. I see someone named iPhone. So I don't know which iPhone that is. So if you show yourself, we can give you a name. Let's see who else. Oh, there's Karen and David. Oh, nice. I'm scrolling through. Okay. And ask the co-hosts to keep letting people in. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. I always like showing this first slide because it's like when you go to a class and you're like, are you in the right class? Or when they announce on the flight, like, are you in the right flight? So here, are you in the right place at UU Catskills here today? Let's see. Yeah. And it's November 22nd already. Good gravy. Okay. Some folks are having trouble getting in. Okay, so good morning. Good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend Dr. Leonisa Artizone, minister here in space at the UU Congregation of the Catskills. Thank you. I'm so grateful that you're joining us this morning for a worship service. I'm glad you keep coming back, even though we all know that Zoom is less than ideal, but it's what we got and we're doing our best. And I'm happy to see you all coming back every Sunday. Whomever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. As we say each week, if you are new or are not getting our emails yet or would like to be part of what's going on, please enter your name and email or phone number if you don't use email, or some way for us to get in touch with you in the chat box. I will capture that information and get it to the right people. So if you're new, welcome, but give us your contact information so we can get a hold of you. If you are new, Unitarian Universalism is a unique liberal faith guided by 7 principles and 6 sources. We carry no creed, but we welcome seekers from all walks of life into our fold. If you would like to know, well, here, I'll show you. Here we go. We embody these principles by supporting Black Lives Matter, by supporting environmental justice and addressing climate change, by supporting immigrant justice, and being partners in the fight and support of LGBTQI rights. We've got a number of things I just want to share. We still have our community solar fundraiser going. So if you've not yet joined the solar farm, please do so. The information is here. It's also been in the newsletter. Okay, so someone who's using the UU Catskills or one of the other hosts, someone keeps accidentally muting me. So this is why it's tricky if someone logs in as UU Catskills. So let's just be careful when we hit mute all that we don't mute the host. I'm hoping I'm still the host. Okay, so that's why I keep going out. Anyway, Jenny Giddy can answer your solar questions. So please reach out to her. I know she's here today, so you can find her in a breakout room as well. We've been doing our wonderful UU community circles. I know there was one last week, a couple took place. There's just a nice way for us to stay connected and geographically stay connected. If you're not sure what circle you're in, or if your circle feels like you have to drive too far, is there a closer circle? Put a question in the chat box, or reach out to Christy Bellecci or Kathy Kasner, and they'll help you. And the Cosm and I had a great chat the other day and decided that one way, as the cold weather begins to descend, is that we'd like to do, the idea behind this was to meet in person, but if it's really cold and that's not possible, then we thought we can at least do small group gatherings with me and with each community circle for like a little mini worship pastoral connection and maybe some deep discussion of UU themes. So please join a circle if you're interested. I know we still need folks to help us coordinate. We need coordinators, basically point people who are willing to email or call folks and say, hey, we're meeting on Tuesday, can you come? So if you're interested in doing that, please let us know. I think I had one more. Oh yeah, one more slide of what's coming up. So today at 4 o'clock, we have our grief support group with Leela Clark. Also directly after services, we'll have UU 101. So if you are new or curious or either about membership or about UU in general, then please come. You will join me for a conversation. Monday night, we have a special event, the Hudson Valley Environmental Justice Coalition, of which we are sponsoring leaders, is doing a special talk with Catherine Coleman Flowers. I believe the link was in the last update, and if not, I'll make sure it gets posted on Facebook and on our website. Buddha Cats Tuesday, Women's Circle Tuesday, and we have our special interfaith gratitude gathering Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'm still getting some mixed words about logistics, but we will keep you posted, but try to block that out. There will be no Vespers this week. There will be no bedtime story. And I just want to remind everyone to save the date for our community read of an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. It will be on December 3rd. You can get the book now and start reading and get as far as you can. There's also a young people's version, which don't be intimidated by because it says for young people. I've heard it's a great read as well. And I know many adults who passed on the adult version and went right to that. So I hope that you all will join us in our community read. And I wanted one more time to post this slide about who to ask, while particularly naming our board members, because I realize that not everybody knows who our board members are. So Kristen Shara is our president, Joyce White, vice president, Tom Hackett, secretary, Karma Haas, treasurer, and our members at large are Kathy Kasner, Jerry Lynn Mason, and Erin Hilgart. So if you have questions or want to get more involved, these are some of the folks you can reach out to. So I'm going to stop our share for a moment. There we go. And yeah, I'm glad we keep things happening, even in this time of strangeness. So we hope, I encourage you to visit our website where everything is updated. That's probably your best way of staying posted on what is happening with UU Catskills. I'm glad you're all here this morning. I hope today and every day you will be inspired by the words of James Vila Blake, written in 1894. Love is the spirit of this faith, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Welcome to this time apart from time. And we will begin this morning with our music director, Catherine Catabiani, playing La Dangereuse by Ludovic Lamotte. Thank you, Catherine. I ask everyone now if you have a candle or a chalice. We're going to go back to our slideshow and light our chalice together.
We light this chalice in grateful, loving community.
Even in the darkest of times,
its flame light path
to courage, justice, and hope.
So before I read our opening words, I wanted to just say something, a little preface, as it were. I want to name a few things. So I gave up celebrating Thanksgiving a number of years ago. My time teaching in the Native American community of the Pacific Northwest 28 years ago put me on a course of questioning anything I had ever learned about Indigenous people and the history of the United States. As I also continue to read our community read an Indigenous people's history of the United States, I grow more and more horrified by the founding of this country and more enraged at the American mythology we teach and perpetuate. Last year at the Interfaith Gratitude Service, where I was blessed enough to give the teaching at Temple Emmanuel, I shared some of those thoughts. And today, I just want to say that I know Thanksgiving is in a few days. And I know that many of us may be feeling sad because we can't gather with family. But I'd like you to, or I invite you to reframe this week. Reframe it through the lens of collective trauma, which we're going to be talking about today, and collective healing. And here's another take on this week. Safety overrides tradition. We need to be aware that our actions during this time of pandemic have serious consequences. So please be safe and do what is best for your health and the health of those you love, or even complete strangers. Just let's care about each other. Thanksgiving is founded on a mythology that perpetuates harm and trauma. So I understand that it may have value in different ways, but instead of focusing on one day for Thanksgiving, I invite you to make gratitude a habit. Gratitude is something we can practice every day. Every day. Our Jewish siblings rise in the morning and thank God for another day. Maybe we should do more things like that. Take some time to stop at each point during the day to offer gratitude for the sunrise, your health, your pets, Zoom, family, a particularly interesting tree growing in your backyard, a good book, whatever it is. I tried to do this for years now, and it's transformational. This idea was made all the more poignant for me last week when I learned that someone I deeply cared about died at the very young age of 41. So I'm going to ask us in David's memory, someone who really lived his life to the fullest, to all consider that we really have no idea what the universe has in store for us. But if we can live in the present and live with gratitude, we may feel and behave much better. And I will say that my gratitude today is for all of you being here with me. Let's worship together. Our opening words come from Joan Javier Duval. Here is where you can lay it down. Lay down all that you have carried, the weight of the world that has rounded your back, leaving you aching and exhausted. Here is where healing begins, where burdens are set down and alongside one another's, their magnitude does not seem as great. Here is where the door is thrown open and the light can lift away the shadows and what was hidden can now be seen. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected, but that you bring all of who you are into the presence of the holy and of this loving community. And we'll begin by singing a hymn entitled, I Know This Rose Will Open, featuring Catherine Katabiani and her daughter, Ella. I'm going to share the slide. I encourage you, like I always do, to sing and sing loud. And this is backwards, so we'll do this first.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. This rose will I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. This rose will I know this rose will open. This rose will I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl my soul. I know this rose will open. This rose will I know this rose will open. This rose will I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl my soul. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl my soul. I know this rose. I know this rose will open.
Let's join together in the spirit of our rose and our fear and our sadness blowing away with our affirmation that we say together. May we be reminded here of our greatest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love to all living beings. May we know once again that we are not isolated, but connected in wonder and joy to mystery and miracle in the universe, in this community, and in each other. So our story this morning will be familiar to the kiddos and the grandparentos who come to story time, because I read this last week or two story times ago, but it struck me so deeply that I thought this is a story we could all read again and again. And I know, Austin, you were there, right? And Jake was there. And so maybe I'm going to share it with you. And so it's about sadness. So it sort of fits, I think, what many of us are feeling right now. It's called Maybe Tomorrow by Charlotte Agile and Ana Ramirez Gonzalez did the illustrations. And I'm going to put it up on the screen, but also read along in my copy here. So, Elba had a big block. She'd been dragging it around for a long time. It made her walk slowly. It made her think darkly. It was heavy. Norris danced everywhere he went, even uphill. One day, Elba was sitting on her block in the park like she usually did. Along came Norris in a cloud of butterflies. At first, Elba couldn't see him in all that shininess. "Hello," I'm Norris, he said. Do you want to go on a picnic? I'm Elba, said Elba. I do not go on picnics. Well, what do you want to do? Asked Norris. Sit here with my block. But you're already doing that. I know. Is it fun? Not really. No. What's in it? Norris wanted to know. In it? Said Elba. What do you mean? Well, it's a box, isn't it? Something must be inside it. It's not a box. It's a block, said Elba. Are you sure? Asked Norris. Yes, said Elba, prodding it with her umbrella. She always carried one in case it rained. Norris sat down next to Elba. I feel something in there, he said. What? Asked Elba, who didn't feel a thing. Something sad, said Norris. I think it wants to come out. How? Whispered Elba. Norris and Elba sat there thinking. The butterflies flitted this way and that. Maybe tomorrow, said Norris as the sun set. Maybe, said Elba. The next day it was raining. The butterflies looked a little damp. The weather didn't slow down Norris, though. You're making me dizzy, said Elba. It's time for tea, said Norris. They had a good, quiet tea with rain in it. Maybe tomorrow, said Norris. Maybe, said Elba, if tomorrow ever comes. Tomorrow didn't come, but another today did. It's really time, said Norris, because I want you to come to the ocean with me. Okay, I'll just take my block, said Elba, surprising herself. But it's too heavy, she added. Right? My butterflies and I will help you, said Norris. They did help. It was a very, very long journey. Elba and Norris talked and didn't talk. I miss Little Bird, said Elba as they crested the last hill. She is gone. I miss her too, said Norris. Elba paused. But you didn't know her. No, but you are my friend, so I can help you miss her. By the time they got to the shore, Norris knew many things about Little Bird. We watched the moon together, Elba said. She taught me to sing. We were hardly ever apart. She loved you so much, Norris said. Yes, said Elba as the waves crashed. Some of the butterflies started to fly out toward the horizon. Come back, shouted Elba. Oh, it's okay, said Norris. Sometimes we have to let things go. They both sat down to rest on Elba's block. But there wasn't enough room. I think it's smaller, said Elba in amazement. And lighter. Definitely, agreed Norris. Together, they stood and faced the roaring sea. I'll always have this block, you know, said Elba. Yes, maybe you will, said Norris, but I will help you carry it sometimes. The two friends stayed by the ocean until the sun set and the view was calm. Some of the butterflies came back. Some flew off forever. The next day was sunny. Do you want to go on a picnic? Norris asked. Yes, said Elba. I love that story. And when the kids and I were talking about it, there's lots of folks in here. I'm having trouble finding people. We were just talking about the idea of when things feel hard. Do you remember, Jake? I see you now. There you are. When things feel hard or we're feeling sad, we can have someone share that sadness or that burden with us, right? It may always be a part of us, but it need not overwhelm us. And Austin, can I unmute you? Will you say one of the things you said at the end of the story time that night, if you remember? But I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you want to or no? You can shake your head no, and I'll move on. Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what I said, but I want to say this.
Okay.
I feel like the butterflies weren't totally real.
Tell more. Say more.
I feel like it was just the emotions.
I like that idea. Like, so they represented what her emotions when she, right? And they surrounded her when she needed love and support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And you know, we talked about it that night. There was that one page that had no words, but just the butterflies.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Thanks, Austin. Thanks for sharing that. And it seems like a perfect time for us with those thoughts from Austin, butterflies representing our emotions and our feelings, to transition into our time for compassion and contemplation. I'd like to start with just a couple of minutes of quiet, of silence, of getting your feet on the ground, of tuning deeply into yourself, your heart, your spirit, and your breath. Let's take a few moments to just be right here, right now. And in the spirit of that story and invoking a ritual I came to love when I was a member at Fourth Universalist, I ask you now to call to mind those times of failure and regret that are common to all of us. Remember in silence those times where perhaps we failed to do all we were meant to do or be all we were meant to be. We now recall moments of integrity, those times we lived into our deepest values and acted as the human beings we always dreamed of being. We choose at this moment to lay down the burden of our shortcomings and grasp the courage to begin anew. Together we affirm our capacity for goodness and grace, for freedom and purpose and joy. We are not trapped in our past, but freed by creation to live and grow today. And in light of our story today and what we're talking about, if there is a particular joy or sorrow you'd like to place in the chat box so that we can hold it together for you, with you, please do so now, or just quietly sit with any of your joys and sorrows. And in the spirit of prayer, spirit of life, the mystery of the universe, we ask that you carry all these joys and sorrows. Remind us that as a community, we can share the load, that we belong to one another. We ask for peace and support. Blessed be and amen. Our offertory, this is our oh no, we're set 2 more Sundays in November. We're going to shift into our offertory. Oh, but I see, yeah, so you can keep adding your joys and sorrows in there. We can read them during the offertory. I chose a song, and I know the YouTube is going to probably cut it out after I post this, but it felt like the perfect song. It's a recording, a live recording of Leonard Cohen. Oh, I forgot to share my screen first. Of Leonard Cohen singing Come Healing live in Dublin. Sorry. And our half plate donation, as we know for the rest of this month, will go to the Boys and Girls Club of Ulster County. And there's so many ways to give, and I thank you for your generosity. And I encourage you to sit again with your joys and sorrows while we listen to the song. Good stuff. Thank you for your generosity, for being here, for giving to the Boys and Girls Clubs and giving to this community. And there's so many ways that you do. I'm going to spotlight Rosalind Daniel, who is a member of the Committee on Shared Ministry, who is going to do our reading this morning.
This is an excerpt from My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Resmaa Menakem. Contrary to what many people believe, trauma is not primarily an emotional response. Trauma always happens in the body. It is a spontaneous protective mechanism used by the body to stop or thwart further or future potential damage. Trauma is not a flaw or a weakness. It is a highly effective tool of safety and survival. Trauma is also not an event. Trauma is the body's protective response to an event or a series of events. that it perceives as potentially dangerous. This perception may be accurate, inaccurate, or entirely imaginary. In the aftermath of highly stressful or traumatic situations, our soul nerve and lizard brain may embed a reflexive trauma response in our bodies. This happens at lightning speed. An embedded trauma response can manifest as fight, flee, or freeze, or as some combination of constriction, pain, fear, dread, anxiety, unpleasant and or sometimes pleasant thoughts, reactive behaviors, or other sensations and experiences. This trauma then gets stuck in the body and stays there until it is addressed. We can have a trauma response to anything we perceive as a threat, not only to our physical safety, but to what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, or yearn for. Trauma responses are unique to each person. Each such response is influenced by a person's particular physical, mental, emotional, and social makeup, and of course, by the precipitating experiences themselves. However, trauma is never a personal failing, and it is never something a person can choose. It is always something that happens to someone.
Thank you, Rosalind. None of us in this room is free from trauma. Some of us have had larger, more impactful personal trauma experiences than others. That is true. We each, though, in some way are fragmented. As our reading today shows, a trauma response is unique to each of us, but these responses serve as a means of protection. Something from our childhood, something we may not even consciously remember, can reside in our body, and the presence of that trauma causes us to respond to situations in certain ways. I have been deeply interested in trauma work for years, so I recently participated in the International Collective Trauma Summit, led by the wonderful Thomas Hübl. I'm going to share a clip with you of him in a moment, but I wanted to first share how Thomas explains trauma. In an interview on one of the first days of the summit, he says this about trauma. I'm going through a very overwhelming experience that overloads my capacity to process that experience. To experience it, my nervous system has, I believe, a mechanism in place that is thousands of years old, which says, okay, I become very stressed, I get overloaded, and then I fragment a part of it. I split a part off, which carries a lot of stress, and around it, there is a numbing. One part of my nervous system becomes numb in order for me to survive better within that situation. So there is hyperactivation and freeze, numbing. So trauma is a frozen area of life. From that moment on, it's a hostage of time because time gets frozen here. So if somebody gets traumatized at age 4, that trauma stays at the level of age 4, stored in the body, in the nervous system, and in the emotional system, and the cognitive system of the person. And even when the person continues his or her development, but that part stays frozen, that's why when we later on have, let's say, relationship dynamics or work dynamics or cultural dynamics, and they trigger that place, we often find ourselves in a regressive version of ourselves, responding or reacting to life from a much younger place because that part cannot experience my current life. So, according to Tomas's description, trauma creates a numbness in us, fractures us into pieces, and then maybe many, many years later, we find ourselves reacting to someone or something, and maybe the reaction is terrifying or disproportionate or shocking, even to ourselves. We are operating from that trauma, and our reactions are our own. But what is truly sad is that through fragmentation, we lose, in essence, a part or parts of ourselves. And it takes deliberate, thoughtful, deep work to become whole again, or maybe whole for the first time. As writer Cheryl Strayed says, the place of true healing is a fierce place. It's a giant place. It's a place of monstrous beauty and endless dark and glimmering light. And you have to work really, really, really hard to get there, but you can do it. I know many of us have been on a journey of healing, and it is work, but it's worth it. Through this process, we can begin to pinpoint or unwrap the sites of our trauma. But here's the interesting thing. It's not only our trauma we carry. We, due to the nature of our existence, are also carrying ancestral trauma and collective trauma. Things that have been passed on through our DNA, our ancestors' experiences, the structure of society, the nature of humanity. I would like you to listen to what Thomas has to say about this.
Ancestral trauma, it means if our ancestors went through traumatizing experiences, that has been most probably passed on to us in a certain way. And then there is the collective. If a collective goes through a war, a civil war, goes through a history of slavery or a Holocaust or some other dictatorships or genocides, these are massive impacts within the body of a society that have long-term reverberations throughout generations. Life tries to heal that. And that's why the impact of massive traumatization, either, so we speak about like kind of a cold collective trauma that happened in the past, but there are current collective traumatizations happening. If you look at Syria, for example, that are happening right now with massive pain being inflicted, massive destruction. And we are living in a time where climate change is going to bring kind of natural catastrophes that are traumatizing on a collective level, including including climate refugees all around the world. So that's a massive composition of trauma, because every new layer triggers the former layer. And if that's not integrated, it actually will make that experience for us very difficult. And we will experience every new level of trauma through the amplification of our history.
Could you speak a little more to the symptoms of collective trauma? You mentioned, this fragmentation that happens when there is an overwhelming experience for us as individuals, like an operation, an accident. But when we're talking about the collective, can you share with us a little more? What does that look like? How does that fragmentation look like at a collective level? What are the symptoms? How can we recognize it?
So we are, like, a description that I like is, let's say I, Thomas, grow up in an apartment my entire life. I never left that apartment. And then one day you, Laura, come to me to visit me in my apartment. And then you say, Thomas, do you know how the house looks like that your apartment's in? And then I'd say, maybe I'll think about how it could look like. But I don't have kind of an outside perspective onto the house that I'm living in my entire life. That's collective trauma. Nobody was ever outside. That's very important. We don't have kind of an outside perspective that we could see tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years of trauma history of humanity, or life even longer, is like, that's how it looks like. You know, when we took a space rocket and the first time somebody was in outer space and made a photo, it was a revolutionary photo. You see this blue marble in the black space, and you say, oh wow, that's how the system looks like that we are all part of. Amazing. So we have an outside perspective, and you say, oh, here I'm living. But we don't have that in regards to collective trauma, because even the astronaut was part of the collective trauma history that made a photo. So when we look from outer space, it looks like a beautiful planet. But when we zoom in, we see the invisible scars all over the world. And we grew up in scar tissue. Some of us way more affected, some of us less affected, but all of us somehow affected. And I think that's a very important part, because that means that we don't know the world without collective trauma.
I hope that makes sense to you, because it totally makes sense to me, right? The ancestral trauma, the suffering or pain that our direct lineage experienced as maybe refugees or immigrants or poor laborers or enslaved people or violent landowners or victims of war, that's been imprinted on us. We don't even know it's there, but it is. Or maybe we become aware of things as we move through our own healing journey that don't quite feel right. We can notice that some of that trauma comes from traditions or practices in our families that no longer seem okay, because we've started to see them for what they are, trauma responses or trauma normalizations. And that's why I love his description of collective trauma. It is so powerful. His apartment analogy, we are all living within a traumatic system. And because it is the only thing we know, we don't see it, and we don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. And because we live within it, well, we have to live within it, we've normalized it and conditioned ourselves to these normal behaviors or normalized behaviors. We've learned to function in this collective trauma situation because it's our only choice, or so it seems. He closes with the line, "We don't know the world without collective trauma." So think about that for a moment. All of us are living in a system that we hopefully already see as violent and oppressive. Although many folks don't see it that way, but I kind of hope lots of us UUs do. And that violence and oppression, of course, manifests differently depending on, say, your skin color, your gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status. And for many of us and many of our fellow US citizens, it's nothing. It's just the way it is. But we who want to look deeper, who are not okay with hierarchy and patriarchy and environmental destruction and poverty and racism and suffering in any form, we are called to the work of collective healing. Hubel tells us, and there were 100,000 of us attending his summit, that after we acknowledge collective trauma, we begin the work of collective healing. Unmetabolized trauma in any community exerts control and resurfaces as problematic symptoms or challenges. Basically, that which we have not yet healed will keep causing harm. That which we have not yet healed will keep causing harm. Do you see it in your family system? We even see it here in our UU Catskills community and in the larger Unitarian Universalist Association in our faith. And we certainly see this happening in our country writ large. Healing happens through transparency, seeing the harm, naming the trauma, and opening the pathway to restoration and repair. So what might that mean for those of us gathered here? Well, I think it starts with being honest with who we are and why we're here, practicing truth-telling, taking responsibility for one's actions, showing healthy remorse, and then naming and honoring truth collectively, especially the truths of this country and how the very foundation of this nation was traumatic. How we treated people who were not white and how we treated the earth herself still lives in our DNA, and we will never be able to move on and do better if we don't fully acknowledge and repair those roots. Today marks the first time I will talk about collective trauma during Sunday service with all of you, but we will talk about it again and again. Collective trauma is a root cause for this unhealthy system of a world we live in. And if we are to transform ourselves, our congregation, our country, or the world, we must engage with the practices of collective healing. We can do our own work. Yes, we should do our own work to become healed and whole. And we also have to do the work of collective healing. We may not solve it all. We certainly may not fix it all, but we can be an important part of the process. Because if not now, when? May we be able to see how our individual trauma affects us. May we begin to see suffering through the lens of collective trauma. May we be called to collective healing. May it be so. Our next song is a bit of a treat. It's something that the UU Musical Ministry put together featuring, where did her, Melody Demore, I think it'll come on the share. And she's going to teach us a little song to sing along.
Hello, UU family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up. Oh, hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please hold me close. Oh, shine on me, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on all you have to do is just ask. The light is always there. Always. Always. Love you.
And she closes saying, if you couldn't hear, all you have to do is just ask. And so I know as we enter this week and this season where sadness can become debilitating, just ask. We are here. I am here for you. We are here for one another. Our closing words come from the poet Jane Hirshfield, and it's entitled The Weighing. The heart's reasons, seen clearly, even the hardest will carry its whip marks and sadness and must be forgiven. As the drought-starved land forgives the drought-starved lion who finally takes her, enters willingly then the life she cannot refuse, and is lion, is fed, and does not remember the other. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks more, and we give it. We're going to extinguish our chalice, sing our benediction, and then move into breakout rooms. And I'm going to suggest now that everyone stick around, even if you're new, don't be afraid. We're a friendly lot. Stick around and get to know one another. And maybe when you're in your breakout rooms, you can reflect on this notion about the idea of living in a system that is traumatic, this collective trauma, and that maybe, you know, how can we access it? How can we look at it differently? How can we see the world through that lens? So I'll share our screen again. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. So take a moment to scroll through and say hi to everyone. I'm going to say that I am so grateful to be with you this morning. I miss you all. As I say, I love you all. I hope I get to see you in some of these smaller gatherings that we have coming up. As I put us into breakout rooms, I'm going to stop recording. Wait, stop.